Welcome to Psychic Evolution with evidential psychic medium Jamie Clark and spiritual coach and healer Maggie Clark.
And welcome back to another episode of Psychic Evolution. I'm Jamie Clark.
And I'm Maggie Clark, and this is the podcast where you discover the psychic potential within to empower yourself and manifest your psychic and mediumship gifts.
And these abilities are so natural. They're supernatural.
And we are so fortunate to welcome back a previous guest from season 3. This is Barbara Wheeling, and she is our go-to numerologist. She was on season 3, episode 8, talking about numerology this year, but on season 3, and now she is back in 2022. We wanted to bring her back to talk about numbers. What's in store for 2022 from a numerological standpoint? And Barbara is amazing. She has a history of numbers throughout her whole life. She actually has her PhD in accounting, among many, many other things she's done with numbers. But numerology has been something that she's been studying for very long time, and she is amazing at her practice. So, Barb, what does 2022 have in store for us?
Well, 2022, if we look at it from a number perspective, is the sum of the digits 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 2, which means it's a 6. We call that a 6 universal year. And that energy is available for all of us, everyone on the planet. And so this is a very different number from last year, 2021, which was a 5 year. And so just to give you some idea of how they're different, the number 5 is about change and movement and progress and adventure and travel and the kinds of things that lead one to have to be adaptable, because it's not very stable sometimes. And there can be a lot of drama associated with the number 5. The 6, on the other hand, is a much more balanced number. The emphasis for a 6 is on home and family and community and responsibility and service. It is more harmonious than a 5. It's more about love and caring and relationships. And it's good energy for healing. It's also associated with abundance. And it can be about beautifying the home, or creating a more harmonious home life. It's good for partnerships of any kind. It's good for families. It's a good year to get married for a lot of people. And so that's a very different energy than the 5. And when I talk about these numbers, I want everybody to understand that it's all relative. It means that there's going to be more emphasis on these things this year in 2022 than in other years. It doesn't mean that other years are bad years for getting married or anything like that. It's just that there's more emphasis on the 6 energy this year than there is in other years.
Would you expect more people to be interested in getting married or starting relationships because of that vibration of 6?
It sort of depends a little bit on the person's personal year. See, we have this universal year number of 6, but every person has a personal year number that is based on their month and day of birth, plus the 6 of 2022. And so it sort of depends, but in general, people would be feeling more drawn to things like relationships or forming a business partnership or starting a family, for example, or maybe doing more travel to see family, or having more fun with family and friends, getting together, because that energy would be more harmonious for those kinds of activities. So it depends a little bit on what a person's personal year number is in terms of how they're going to interpret or how they're going to experience that 6 energy.
Beautiful. I know we've already started to do many of the things you've just talked about, even in our own home. We've been cleaning and really beautifying our home with intention and, really getting things so that, they feel good. They just feel really balanced. And we had just redecorated a little bit of our living room. And last night, even, we were just like, wow, it just feels so good. It just feels balanced in here. And that was the exact word I think that you used, right, Jamie?
Yeah. And just a moving around of things. That's it. But it was a vibe that really kind of went through the whole house in that area. So it was really nice when we're just doing our own day-to-day living. And yet a lot of these things are already tying into those kinds of information to go, oh, that is part of it. Yeah, we did do this. And it's kind of nice to be able to look back possibly through that awareness to see how things played out in connection with those numbers. How did that happen?
And it makes sense with your own personal year numbers. I mean, I should say your life path numbers as well, because I happen to know that Maggie's is a 4, and a 4 person, a 4 and a 6 combination is going to be someone who's going to want to organize. This is a good year to clean out the closets, and organize the garage, And someone with a 3 life path or a 3 personal year is decorating. Yes, we're going to move the furniture around. We're going to make the place look better. We're going to buy some new paintings, or we're going to, decorate in some way, because there's going to be more emphasis on harmony and balance and beauty.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We've already been feeling the shift of vibration. It's been awesome.
Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing about numerology is that there are some people who are going to be in a 6 personal year along with the universal year of 6. So that really doubles up for them. They're really going to have a lot of that same kind of feeling all year, and it's going to be even more intense. I shouldn't say intense in a bad way, but intense and more emphasis on those things because their personal year number happens to be the same as a universal year number.
So for our listeners out there, if you have a birthday where your month and your day add up to a 9, that means that you will also be in a 6 personal year.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
So for instance, if your birthday was July 2nd, you'd add the 7 plus the 2 and you'd equal the 9. And that means, I'm at now 9 plus 6 is 15. 1 plus 5 equals 6. I'm in a 6 personal year.
Nice. Correct.
So that's really cool. I have quite a few people in my life that's how that works out for them, is just connected to that universal year all the time, in that vibration. I'm a year ahead. So I'll be a 6 universal year, but a 7 personal year. So that should be a little bit different in maybe the amount of time I want to spend with people or not.
Correct. I can run through the numbers 1 through 9 and sort of give you a flavor of what each of those numbers is like. So the number 1 is usually a good time to start something. So some people will be in a 1 personal year during 2022. So it's a good time to start something. Conceive of an idea. Sometimes you don't take a lot of action, but it's like planting the seeds. You're just trying to figure out where you're going to go next, because you're starting a new 9-year cycle. So there's something new or something that has changed, and it's like, okay, what now? What do I do next? And so in a 6 personal year, you might be spending time just really kind of focusing in on, well, what do I need? What do I need to nurture myself? Because I don't know where I'm going next, but what kind of nurturing and self-care do I need? The 2 number is more about connecting and preparation. And so anybody who's in a personal year of 2 this year, the 2 with a 6 universal year number, that is the 2 best number combination, 2 and 6, for making connections, getting married, forming partnerships. It's the most harmonious combination of numbers you can possibly have. The 3 is more of a creative type number, and it is also associated with socializing and having fun. And so in a 6 universal year, somebody in a personal year of 3 might be having a lot of conversations with family and friends, might even be doing some speaking in the community, if they're out doing some stuff that is community related. With a 4, like I said, there's more about getting things organized, maybe developing some kind of a process or, a new way of doing things that creates more harmony. 5 is about growth. And like I said, it's associated with travel. So there might be a lot of travel to visit family, this year. 6 is more, like I said, more emphasis on all of the 6. So anybody in a personal year of 6 is going to have a lot of emphasis on the 6 stuff. The 7 is more of a intellectual or spiritual energy. And so when it comes to activities related to the 6 universal year, I would say that this could be a good year for healing, spiritual healing. Someone might be spending a lot of time helping others with that or doing their own healing. It could be a very intuitive type of process for someone. Now, someone in an 8 personal year in 2022, the 6 and the 8 together are the best 2 numbers for money and abundance. And so this could be a very good year for someone who's in a business or focused on their career. They could end up with a promotion. This is just an example of some of the types of energy. Someone in a 9 personal year, when the universal year is a 6, this is all about service. Because 6 and 9 are very service-oriented numbers. And so this could be a very good year for charity work or community service of some kind. There could be just more emphasis on it than other years.
I really want to pick this apart because you did mention that 2 and 6, the number 2 and 6 were the best for connections, relationships, and marriages. And in 2022, we have all those 2s. We have the 2 and the 0 and the 2 and the 2 to add to the 6. What kind of influence do the 2s have to build into the 6? Because I'm looking at triple 2s and a 6. I'm like, everybody should fall in love this year and get married, but not necessarily. There might be that impetus because of those 2s. Do you feel the same way, or in your experience of numerology, how does that work?
The 2 is very much about connecting. It's about seeing the other person's point of view. It's about balance. When you think about 1 versus 2, 1 is a very singular thing, but a 2, there's another perspective. There's another person. There's male versus female. There's yin versus yang. There's light versus dark. We have a much broader perspective of the world when we can see more than one side to something. And so the 2 helps us make connections with other people in that way. The other thing about 2 is that it is very harmonious. It is very peaceful. It is one of the numbers where things get very quiet because you can contemplate. It's very similar to a 7 in that way, that it's a good time for contemplation. But mostly it's about peace and harmony. And that's why it works very well with the 6, because 6 is also harmonious. Now, with the 2, it's usually more about one-on-one types of relationships, whereas 6 is broader. It's more like family and community. And so the 2 is very nice for making the connection and having the balance and having the perspective of what another person is going to be thinking and feeling. It's a very sensitive number also. People with a lot of 2 energy are very empathic. They're very sensitive to other people's feelings. They can often feel other people's feelings. And so that helps in relationships because you can understand the other person much better if you have that kind of sensitivity.
Now, because this is a universal number, do you feel like maybe humanity as a whole will experience higher levels of empathy or higher levels of connecting to each other, to oneness, not feeling alone? Is there a potential that with all the 2, 0, 2, 2 combined?
Absolutely. Yes, very much more about empathy, much more about healing also. And so people are more likely to have a much better time this year as opposed to last year. If we think about, for example, the pandemic, going back to 2020, everything felt like it was stuck. And the downside of a 4, which is what 2020 was, is being stuck. It's like, I can't move. I just have to follow the process. I just have to take step by step. Then in 2021, I think I said this in the last podcast, we're likely to see more change and movement in terms of the pandemic. And sure enough, we did. Okay, what did we see? We saw a lot more progress made on vaccines, for example. We also saw a lot of ups and downs because it can be about unexpected things. 5 can be about unexpected things. So what did we see? New variants, In the spring, the cases were up, and then in the summer, they were down, and then in the fall, they came back up again. There was this up and down thing going on. Okay, so in terms of relationships, 5 is not very conducive for settling down. It's much more about, in terms of relations, it's more about the love affairs. It's more about adventure. It's not about long-term relationships. Well, the other thing about the 5 I want to say is that a lot of emphasis on freedom. And so we all know the stories about people who didn't want to be vaccinated, people who didn't want to wear masks, people who wanted to travel but didn't want to have to follow the rules. That's all 5 energy. This year, it's more likely that people are going to step back and say, okay, I understand why we have to do these things. I understand that this is necessary, because 6 is a lot about responsibility. It's about service, and it's about taking care of each other. And so, yes, when you say more empathy, absolutely more empathy. Now, it doesn't mean that all of the chaos is going to go away, but the pendulum should be swinging in the other direction.
Right. And just so our listeners know, we're not talking about whether you should get vaccinated or not. That's your personal choice.
Absolutely. Yeah, It's just that it was very prominent, in the conversations and in discussions and on the news.
Right.
Likely see less of that. The other thing about the 6 energy that's going to be helpful in terms of the pandemic is that a lot of people lost someone during the pandemic and are probably still grieving. And this will be a good year for healing, for dealing with that grief and healing. So not only a better year for healing from the virus, but also just healing from the losses that have occurred.
Absolutely. And I think, we're healing from even the 5 energy of 2021. We're healing from the loss of freedom, from not being able to do X, Y, Z because of restrictions or changes that happened around us as well. And when we become restricted, or we don't have what we call our freedom, or what we're used to, like doing what we want when we want because we're spoiled, at least I'll speak from experience, then we move into that 6 vibration, and that gives us an opportunity to heal, whether it's the grief from losing someone, whether it's like just healing my own ego because it didn't get what it wanted. There's a lot of places that we can heal in that 6 as well.
Absolutely. And like I said before, that 6 is about responsibility as well, not just to ourselves, but to our community, to our families, to the world at large.
Beautiful. So I still think those 2s and that 6 are going to wreak havoc with people wanting relationships like crazy this year. I definitely feel that could be one of the vibrations there. And when I teach tarot, I teach in a very simplified way. So I talk about 2s and 6s. If you see 2s and 6s, you can go to relationship places. If you see 1s and 9s, go to the self, bring it back home. And it just makes it fluid in terms of being able to read energy. And when people come with relationship questions and I see a lot of 2s and 6s, I'm like, okay, you're on the right track. This relationship is definitely, on point. The cards are showing that. And when I see 1s and 9s, I'm like, well, you might learn from this relationship, but you got to bring it back home, learn about yourself, and make sure that you're having that relationship to yourself as well.
The other thing that comes up sometimes in numerology is there a negative side to the numbers? And so you can have too much of an energy. You can have too much of a good thing, so to speak. So the downside of a 6 would be perhaps energy that's a little controlling, because 6 can be very much about parenting and authority. Okay, but you can have too much of that. So it could be a lot of control. It could be overdoing. People who are in service areas might be actually overdoing, caretaking too much at the expense of themselves. Person might feel tied down too much because of the responsibility of everything. And the same way with the twos, there's an oversensitivity that can happen with twos. And so sometimes if you have too much 2 and too much 6, you end up in disharmony rather than harmony. And there are some people who would say that in a 6-year might be when a relationship breaks up because there's an imbalance. It actually becomes too much of the energy can create an imbalance. And so divorces often happen in a 6 time period because of that. There's something that needs to be better, and it's not getting there. It's not healing in a way. I say this with the caveat that there's soul contracts that are always a part of everything, and the timing of when a soul contract is completed may or may not have anything to do with numerology. There is this sense of there can be too much of an energy sometimes.
Yeah. And I know the downside of a 2 could be codependence.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when we have all those 2s, if we are in a codependent relationship or if we're dealing with codependent issues, those most likely will come to the forefront.
Yes, that's another aspect of the 2. The other thing about 2s is that what we're seeing in our society these days is that we can see somebody else's point of view, but instead of trying to understand it, some people are being antagonistic about it. So then there becomes a division rather than more harmony. There's a division. And so part of the growing pains that we're going through right now is getting to a point of being okay with somebody who has a different point of view than we do. And in the process of the growing, we first have to see what the other side is and then do the reconciliation.
I like having those 2s and 6s together, but all those 2s, there is that issue of empathy. There's an issue of like, am I going to get codependent in a relationship? Am I going to get too sensitive? I have so many clients but they're asking how they deal with that level of empathy that's creating almost anxiety. And so I think also, would you say that the 2s with the 6s will work with any mental health projects as well for anxiety, depression, things of that nature?
Are you asking, will the 2s and 6s help with mental health or contribute to it?
Well, I guess it could go either way, right? Depending on if it's in balance or not.
Right. It could go either way. Yeah.
Okay.
The world at large, though, is becoming more sensitive as they're opening up and evolving. We're all getting more empathic. There's a lot more talk about empaths and highly sensitive people and people who are recognizing that that's a gift, but it's also very hard to deal with sometimes. Yeah. So, yeah, very much so. There could be too much of that. And that's where sometimes a person might feel kind of smothered because there's just too much of it.
Right.
And so one has to be grounded. One has to take the time to get grounded. And that's where some 4 energy helps a lot. If you can get grounded during all of this is the thing that many teachers are talking about now in terms of dealing with empathy and being empathic, overly empathic in particular, is to get grounded, get centered.
Do you know anyone that you're aware of that by working with the numerology has started to tap in and use their psychic abilities as well because of that vibe of information? Have you seen people that have ever activated by doing that?
I don't know that they've been activated, but I will say this, that when I'm doing a reading, I can look at a number and understand that there's many different issues or traits associated with that number, but which of those traits applies to that person? That's where the intuition comes in. If this was a science or something that was easy, all we would have to do is look at a number and say, okay, all of these things apply, but they don't, because there's many different aspects to a number. And so intuition comes in terms of being able to understand, well, which aspect of the number applies to this person. And so there is an intuitive side to all of this. In terms of activating psychic ability, I think there are some time periods and some numbers that are more conducive to that. For example, a 7. 7 and 11 would be the most psychic of the numbers. anytime that you have a master number 11 show up, it could indicate that psychic ability is going to be more prominent during that particular time period.
Now, with the 2s and the 6s, when we're maybe a little bit more empathic and feeling things, I've always thought that our psychic abilities, our psychic senses are connected a lot to some of the empathy as well. It's another, I guess, a portal or another way to enter as feeling things to receive information, whether it's psychic information or just being sensitive to your environment. Do you feel like these 2s, the 2022, the 2s in the 2022 and the 6 can help harmonize people working with their gifts actively because they're making the connections? Or do you feel like people will be more focused on other people because of the relationship piece and the fact that 2s and 6s are looking, the 2s look outside of themselves to relate, the yin, the yang, and the 6s work for a family and a community? Do you feel like those numbers can help or hinder that type of psychic exploration?
I wouldn't say they would hinder it. I would say that it depends more on the individual person. What is their life path number? What is their personal year number? What cycle are they in? What is their expression number? Their destiny. The 2s can certainly help them open up. And the other thing associated with 2, not necessarily in terms of the year 2022, but for some people, the 2 is actually the lower octave or the lower expression of the 11. And 11 is very insightful. There are some people who are in a personal year of 2, which is really based on 11. So this is going to be a year where they're going to be focused on more development of psychic ability. And what will happen in this case is they will be more intuitive about other people. That's where it would come in to play, is that they're going to be more intuitive about other people, more intuitive about what another person wants or needs. There may be more sensitivity there, but not necessarily in a bad way. It's just that they will have a better insight into what another person is needing at the moment.
Are you able to pick up insight as to maybe the timing of doing something through numerology? Meaning, a person's a writer and they're just finishing the book at the beginning of the year, and they're not really sure when would be the most productive timing to connect with a particular publishing company or whatever. Are you able to get insight to maybe even get time frames of potential information for the person?
Yes, because there are some time periods that are better for some activities than others. Okay, so when it comes to publishing a book, there's a couple of different things I would look at. 2 energy is really good for making connections. 9 energy is very good for completing something. And so if you were in a year of a 2 or a year of a 9, those might be good years for connecting with a publisher, because you're trying to finish the book. That's the 9, and the 2 is about connecting. But you can also look at the month of the year. Everybody has a personal month number, and so you might pick a certain month, to make that connection. You might look for a 2 month, for example, as opposed to maybe a 5. A 5 might not be a good month to enter into a contract. Sometimes they say, avoid contracts in a 5 because plans are not going to go the way you think they will. And so you might want to look at some of the numbers in a month to determine whether or not it's a good month to do something.
Are you able to, for me, I do readings for major corporations to see in what areas are people most effective, who is able to work most effectively together. Are you able to go through numerology in this way of knowing the individualized people's information, but being able to see where and who they're best to work with just by having the information? Can you give people information to where they can work with it and help heal themselves in their own life about circumstances or whatever the case is?
It depends on who they're working with or what situation they're dealing with. Okay, so if the situation for work or for a healing situation or any type of relationship the best thing to do is to know the numbers of yourself and the other person, because then you have an insight into how the other person operates. And when you do that, then you have a much better chance of being able to understand them and then how to relate to them. Okay, so in work relationships, it's the same thing. Yes, there are probably some that are more compatible with others. In numerology, we have something that's called concords. And one of the concords is 1, 5, and 7. The 1, 5, and 7 people are going to be very much in their heads, in their minds. They're going to be generating new ideas, and they're going to be very mentally focused, intellectually focused. The 3, 6, and 9 people are going to be the creative types. They're also going to be the ones that are going to be the easiest to work with because they're more associated with emotions, and they're going to have more sensitivity to other people's emotions. And so these are the people you want to put in the HR department, for example, because they're going to have more sensitivity. The 2, 4s, and 8s, those are the people who are going to get the work done. Just tell them what to do and then get out of their way, because they're the ones who are going to know what to do and how to get it done. Whereas the 1, 5s, and 7s are the thinkers, the 2, 4s, and 8s are the doers.
It's kind of interesting, but tying into that, the numbers have pretty specific information. Each number has its own individualized bit of information. Those numbers hold the intent of, like, the number 2 vibrates with this information and it's consistent. So in that, are you able to tie into this about future lives, soul growth, and what they could experience because of their numbers or their universal numbers?
Well, we've been talking about dates a lot, but there are numbers associated with names. A person's birth name, for example, carries a lot of information about things like their heart's desire, their personality, their destiny. All of that is related to the birth name. Okay. And anytime a person changes their name, they add some energy to their birth name. And so, yes, we could look at places as well, or the names of businesses, or the names of another planet, and see what the number is associated with that. So yes, I mean, in a sense, what we're talking about here is the universality of numbers. Numbers are universal no matter what star system you're in or what planet you're on. Okay. But you have to have a name to have a starting point. Otherwise, you don't really know what the energy is.
Right. The label.
Right.
But the starting point, a name, it depends on the circumstance for myself, because a lot of times, if a person's asking me about this person or that circumstance, if I need it, I'm like, okay, what's their first name? That's all I need. The first name in this case, David. There's more than one David on the planet, but I usually be very accurate with circumstances and dynamics and experiences and personalities going on. They're like, yeah, exactly. But the point is that energy of what you're picking up is vibing with the numbers. There is no guesswork and such a huge fluctuation. It all seems to be tying together in a universal oneness.
And you were bringing up something about the nuances, like how there's so many Davids in the world, but they're not all the same. They're going to have some commonalities. That's why a numerology profile is so important, because I look at 13 different numbers. We have many people who are born on the same day, but they're not going to be have the same energy because their profile is different. I did a reading for a pair of twins. Well, they've got the same date of birth, right? So there's a lot of things that are similar, but their names are different, even though their last names is the same. Middle and first names are different, and that through a whole different profile for them. And so everything is going to be based on a total picture. We're just talking about things like personal year or universal year, but there's a lot more to numerology than just those things. There's a lot of other different time periods too, besides just
what do you mean?
There are 3 cycles in a person's life. They're long-term cycles. They last roughly 27, 28 years. And then the number changes to a different number. So from birth to late 20s, and then late 20s to late 50s, and then for the rest of your life. There's also 4 pinnacle time periods and 4 challenge time periods. And
What does that mean?
Pinnacle time periods are the time periods where you look at the number to see what is going to be the kinds of activities where you're going to be successful. And the challenge time periods run the same length of time, but the numbers associated with those challenges are where you're going to find challenges in that particular span of time. Things you're going to have to overcome or going to be presented with overcoming during that time period.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, and that is people are just doing them, and most people aren't aware of numerology. But then you start wrapping that off, and like, that's exactly how I am. And the good thing is, like I was saying, they had no clue, but they're still in their own reality vibing with a lot of the qualities and characteristics, the information associated with that particular number. That's why I find it interesting that you don't even have to know what's going on. It's still going on.
Yes, and what is useful about numerology is that when something changes, you can understand why it's changing. For example, I retired from my academic career in a 9 personal year, and I didn't really even see it coming. I should have, knowing that there could be an ending in a 9 year, but I didn't know that the ending was about my career. But then when it happened, and it was very sudden, when it happened, it was like, oh, yeah, of course. Something was going to have to end this year, and I didn't know what it was, and now I know. And so it's like, you don't worry about, well, did I do something wrong? Should I have done something different? No, because it was time. It was time for it to end.
That's nice, because a lot of times we do have that feeling of, oh, something's got to change, something's got to give. Whether it's, a change or an ending or a beginning, like we tune into these cycles of life, but we don't always know how connected it is to these numbers. And this is one of the things when I started really applying numerology in my life, it's like, well, what day am I having? And I'll figure it out. I was like, oh, that's why this is happening. Or what kind of month am I having? And then, I look at the numbers. I'm like, that's why I'm having those types of experiences. Do you take into account how old someone is, and when you add those digits together as a number that could play into the universal number and a personal year number as well?
Yes, that's called an age number.
Okay.
And the way I've been taught is that you add the 2 ages of that year. So if someone is, let's say, 52, and then they have their 53rd birthday in 2022. So you would add the digits of 52 and 53 together and reduce that down. And so in this case, it would be, 555. I think it would end up as a 15, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So they might be in a personal year of, let's say it's a 3, but their age number is 6. And so the age number tells us more about what that personal year is about for them. And in this universal year of 6, that person would be very much focused on family. You got the universal year of 6, you got the age number of 6, and then they're in a personal year of 3. Well, there's going to be a lot of conversations with people,
Right.
and could be a lot of creativity as well.
Now, if someone was born in January and started their whole year as 52 years old, if they, January 1st, I turned 52, would you still add the 52 and the 53 together?
There's different points of view on that, because there are some people who would say if somebody born on January 1st really just has the age of that year.
Right.
And even early in the year, early in January, they're not going to be the previous age very long. So some might say, well, it's really going to be more about being 53 than it is about 52. And then there are some people who would just go ahead and add the 2 together anyway, because the year started that way. So there's really different schools of thought on that. I don't think there's one exact way of doing that.
Yeah, because when I have a birthday, I'm like, okay, I just turned 47 in August, so I've got the 11-2 energy happening. But I've never added them together. Just every August, I just switch it in my head and go to town with new numbers. I just feel like the new year and your birthday will grant you that new energy, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, most of the numerology that I've read about and studied really doesn't look at the age on your new birthday. It's the age of before and after that birthday.
That's really great to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Never known that before. Cool.
Well, you're going to get that in my reading next week when I send it to you.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, your personal year reading.
And if anybody wants a personal year reading, if anybody wants a life reading just with their numbers, Barbara is amazing. She does an amazing job. And you can reach her at intuitivenumbers@gmail.com. And we'll put all this information on the show notes for you as well so that you can connect with her when you're ready for your reading. She's awesome.
Yeah, the best thing to do is for a person to calculate their own personal year number. Take the number of the month they were born, add it to the digits of the day that they were born, and then add that to the 6 of 2022, and that'll get your personal year number.
Yep. And if you want to learn about the personal month and the personal day, please go back and listen to season 3, episode 8. All of that information's in there as well. And if you have questions, you can always reach out to Barb and schedule an appointment with her, and she can really talk you through all your numbers in a very efficient and beautiful way.
Thank you very much for sharing your insight. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you both for having me and for the questions you've asked. This is a great conversation as always.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where this 6 year is going to go for everybody. I've talked to so many people, and many, many people, almost everyone I've talked to has said health is my main focus this year. Health, 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 like getting healthy. And I think having that 5 vibration, no one could get on track, man. It really was like just when you think you could go to the gym and then you could, the structure that we had in 2020 that completely broke down. You know, we never really got a handle in that 5 year last year to establish great routines. I mean, some people, of course, have great routines. Me, no, I did not have great routines. That went by the wayside. And I also feel that longing just to get back into a balance, back into a harmony, back into a healthy rhythm. And I love how the 6s and the 2s can offer that balance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So listeners, have fun with the 6 energy. Don't get married on a whim. Make sure that you're not being codependent. No, just kidding.
Where are we going with
I don't know where we're going. Have fun with the 6 energy, whether you're focused on health, relationships, family, harmony, community, responsibility, and please always be of service to your fellow man. And enjoy the 2's energy too, because this year you're going to be making lots of connections to help guide you into your path of service, to help you explore that level of responsibility so that you can do it maintaining balance and harmony and a positive, healthy vibe. Oh, thank you so much for joining us, Barb. This was so awesome.
Well, thank you guys as well. It's always a pleasure to talk with you both, and always fun to talk about numerology too.
So listeners, have fun with the 6s and the 2s. 2022! Yeah.
You got it. Yeah.
If you have been enjoying this podcast, we please ask that you go to Apple Podcasts and go ahead and rate this podcast. Leave us an awesome review. We really appreciate your reviews. They mean a lot to us. And thank you so much. If you are listening to this on something other than Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review on our website. We also have a little microphone on the bottom right-hand corner of our website. If you want to ask a question and leave us a question, it will be a voicemail recorded. We'll play back your voice on this podcast and answer your questions if we can get to them all. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We love you guys.